My name is Ramon Ray. Today we're going to talk about mental health and entrepreneurship, mental health and running your own business, or mental health. And even if you work for a trillion-dollar company, the aspect of mental health for professionals or businesses is so important. And we have someone here today who definitely knows a thing or two about that. That's Dr. Ajetta Robinson, who's going to share with us today all about the aspects of running your business and or being a professional, but I'm going to veer towards entrepreneurship because that's me, and mental health. Dr. Ajetta, thanks for being here today. And how are you doing today as we have some time to discuss how are things in your world?
And well, busy because, mental health doesn't stop. And being an entrepreneur, there's always things to do. But thank you for allowing me to just share some space and knowledge with your community.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Ajetta, before we begin, I should say the proper way of saying it is Dr. Robinson, but I get a little personal by saying the first name. But Dr. Robinson, tell us who you serve, what you do, and the best way to reach you. Just right at the top, introduce yourself today, who you are, LinkedIn, website. Feel free to take some time and unpack who you are today, who you serve. Those listening can get a context of why they should be listening to you.
Yes, thank you. So clinically, I'm a licensed professional counselor with expertise in grief and trauma. I lead a team of 170 clinicians across the country, and so very large. We're making a lot of impact there. When I'm not providing direct service or leading my team, I also help other mental health professionals launch and scale their businesses while also providing some organizational wellness. So going into organizations, corporations, schools, and really helping them think about how their mental health of their team, of their employees impacts overall productivity and profitability. And so that's kind of what I do. And I'm Dr. Ajetta on all platforms. So Dr. Ajetta Robinson is kind of hard to hide, right? Which also means it's hard for me to, act up. Because it's just me. So ajettarobinson.com is my website, and Dr. Ajetta Robinson on all social media platforms.
I love that. Well, I'm so glad you're here. Let's jump right into it. And maybe let's define what does that mean? Again, I'm assuming you correct me if I'm wrong. Anytime, correct me. Hey, Ramon, no, I don't agree with that. But I'm just going to make some broad assumptions. Mental health, we're talking about those feelings you feel, I guess, good or bad, mental, joy, happiness, got ice
Yes.
cream and you feel good about it. So I see you nodding. So just to set the stage, mental, right? We're not talking about building
Yes.
funnels, Facebook ads, hiring a team. We're talking
Yeah.
about the brain stuff. So that's one. And then two, I'm guessing when we talk about mental health, the connotative, I think it's a big word I'll use in front of the doctor here, is where it gets maybe a bit yucky, like
Yes.
depressed, you feeling
Absolutely.
down, your family, whatever it means. So with that context, jump right in and maybe start at the top. What does that mean to you? What does that mean for your practice? The business owners you see, maybe what's their top struggles? And then we'll go from there.
Mhm. Yeah, so I love that you kind of position this as mental health being a continuum because I think sometimes we only talk about mental health when we are struggling, but mental health also includes the healthy aspects when we're doing well, the things that we're doing or experiencing that bring us joy, comfort, all of the things, right? And that there is a connection between our mind, our thoughts, and our body. So how we feel, right, on a day-to-day basis, those are related. And so one of the big things that I see in the work that I do, primarily working my direct practice, my direct work and practice is primarily with other entrepreneurs and or C-suite leaders and executives. And so two kind of concerns that comes up repeatedly that often brings them in because their mental health is struggling or their productivity suffering or relationships are experiencing the gap, right, that happens when we are struggling from a mental health perspective is imposter syndrome and decision fatigue. Imposter syndrome shows up when we maybe don't have confidence in our skills, our abilities, our business even. And it's interesting because I can say that I've actually never encountered someone that wasn't an expert when they're experiencing imposter syndrome, right? It's usually the folks that are absolutely shouldn't be doing what they're doing, but they have no imposter syndrome, right? And so it's interesting that it seems like the more we know, the more we're aware of what we don't know, and that creates a gap in our confidence and our abilities, even in the face of measurable success, right? And so that then turns into kind of some fear, some instability. It may even impact our ability to execute and implement in our business. The kind of second cousin to that, that I think kind of pairs alongside that is decision fatigue. How many of us are wearing all of the hats in our business? We may even have team, right? Right. We're wearing all the hats in our business, and yet we are making all of the decisions. And sometimes we're making decisions that are totally outside of our scope, but there's no one else to make those decisions, right? And then we go home And there are more decisions to make, right? Even what are we having for dinner, or like what's happening with the kids? And so the decision fatigue creates a lot of anxiety, right? And so we see mental health challenges, statistically speaking, in entrepreneurs exceeds the rate of mental health challenges that exist in the general population who aren't entrepreneurs. And I think that we don't talk about this piece enough, if at all, right? Until we kind of hit rock bottom and revenue is being impacted, that we actually have to infuse in the culture of the organizations we create, that our overall health and well-being have to also be a part of that revenue strategy, right? For many of us, we're the most valuable player. For many of us, we're the only player, right? And so we really can't afford to not think about the balance we're creating and the ways that we're creating culture that promote wellness for us, even as the entrepreneur.
Wow, that is powerful, Dr. Jetta. And again, we're talking to Dr. Jetta Robinson. You can see her across the platforms, Dr. Jetta Robinson. I'm assuming just Google her name. She'll pop up everywhere you want to be. It leads me to three more questions. One, I want to get into decision fatigue. I want to unpack that a bit. I want to talk about this aspect of imposter syndrome. At first, I thought it was just something people say, like, we're going to recycle, but you just say it like to be fad. But I'm realizing, no, it's a real thing. People are not just saying it.
Yeah.
But I want to get to something you said. Oh, my question to you is, how do we solve for this? And I know this is a big question. This is your practice, but I continually want to understand, if my Facebook ads aren't working, I can call a guy and he can fix it. If my website gets hacked, I can call a gal and she'll fix it. Could be a few hours, but there's a beginning and an end. If I'm having a hiring problem, what do? Go on Upwork.com, click a button and hire 3 people. Ka-ching. But if I'm feeling imposter syndrome, if I'm feeling, and these are things I've gone through, Dr. Ajeta, suicidal, depression, I'm feeling yucky. And again, some of these are big words, so people can't take it. Forgive me, but I'm speaking real here. My journey here.
Yes.
And I know this is your practice, but I'm saying it in a deeper way. Do I just call a gal? That'd be Dr. Jetta, and 1 hour, 2 hours later, we're good. Can you help me unpack this aspect of what do we do? We're feeling yucky. We're feeling bad. We're feeling tired. We're feeling we're not fulfilled. I'm not helping my wife enough. Not helping my husband enough. And I'm an entrepreneur. You get what I'm throwing at you?
Yes,
and I know we don't have
absolutely.
10 hours to unpack it, but what do we do to
Sure.
understand what happens?
Yeah. So I want us to think about our mental health because it exists on a continuum. There's going to be days where you're going to be at a high, and the imposter syndrome is going to be non-existent. We had some big wins, all the things. And then we're going to have that cyclical period in our business where revenue is slow, it's non-existent, and the bills are still, they still want their money. They do not care, right? And that can have a significant impact on our overall mental health wellness. Financial stress is a big trigger and stressor for mental health challenges, right? I also want to normalize that having mental health challenges is normal. The challenge that happens is when it becomes disruptive to your overall quality of life, when that mental health challenge becomes the norm. And here's what happens, and this happens more commonly for men, and more commonly for folks that are kind of marginalized by identity, whether that be race, ethnicity, gender, what have you, is that we often don't seek help until we're on fire. And I want us to normalize that, if something's happening with your website, you don't wait until the website is offline, right? When you notice that the page is loading slow, you call someone, right? And it's still taking payments, it's still functioning, but it's not functioning at its full capacity, right? We immediately call someone because we know what happens if we don't address the issue and we delay it. Then our business might be shut down because we can't even bring customers in. I want us to think about our mental health in the same way. When you begin noticing a change in your overall functioning and your feeling, you deserve and desire a space to be able to process that, right? And to be able to unpack that. And so I think that's one, is being able to have a safe space to name what you're experiencing, right? And I think it's harder for us to ask for help when we have a successful business, because who feels bad for us, right? Like, you're getting some wins. Like, what are you complaining about? And I always ask my clients, like, where did you learn that? Where did you learn that you couldn't ask for help when you were struggling personally? Where did you learn that you had to just push through, even when it caused you pain, right? And oftentimes we are aware that there's something different, but we can't name it. And we have a really difficult time of healing from things that we can't name. And so I think that we wait too long to reach out for help for mental health things, right? I also think we have unrealistic expectations about, coming to therapy. And it's usually not one session that's going to resolve all the things, especially most of us have been carrying these things with us from childhood, and we just kept bringing it right along, and we need to unpack some stuff, right, to determine, what can go with us on the next leg of our journey. What do we want to keep? What do we want to donate? What do we want to discard? Right. And so who did we become as a result of who we had to be? And that also is something that happens because we have to wear so many hats in this entrepreneurial journey. And so we kind of have to redefine that. And that's not something that happens overnight, right? I love that during the Olympics, Simone Biles talked about how before her competition or performance, she met with her therapist, right? Like
Visualize.
proactively, preventatively, right? Not because, oh, I need to meet with my therapist because things didn't go my way, but I meet with my therapist so that I give myself the best set of odds, right, to perform at my highest level. And knowing that it happens in our mind well before it happens in our actions, right? And so if we can get that on board and align, we're just stacking the odds in our favor. And so I think that we just wait too long, right?
What's the difference, Dr. Ajetta? Again, we're talking to Dr. Ajetta Robinson here. You can find her at drajettarobinson.com. Is that right? Okay. And Dr. Ajetta Robinson, just across all platforms, find her there. A mental health practitioner, helping mental health professionals build their businesses and helping entrepreneurs do the same. Did I say that about right? Okay,
You
good.
got it.
Can usually have the people do this, but we're in a flow. Curious. So leads me to the other thing. Then is this akin then to meeting with your bookkeeper 4 times a year? And I know it depends. I'm assuming because many years, so I get it. You're not giving practicing health here again for those who full disclosure. But again, is it something like that? Say Ramon, I don't have a specific issue, but I'm hearing what you say. Dang, if Simone Biles did it, I should do it. Would we just, and let's say I don't even know why I want to talk to you, Dr. Ajetta. Would it just be no problem? That's your job to unpack and meet. Is that one? And then
Yes.
two, do we just meet once a month, once a quarter, whatever the cadence that may be? Is that as simple as it could be when there's no egregious issue, meaning when it's just,
Sure.
okay, yeah, I'll unpack that.
Absolutely. And so that is curated. It's tailored to what's happening for you, right? And so I have clients where we meet weekly, and there's some clients where we meet monthly. Sometimes they're in maintenance and they pop in, right? A little less frequently. That really just depends, right? So sometimes we're offering kind of maintenance support. Again, wanting to normalize. There are clients that there have been times where I've met with my own therapist twice a week, right? During a peak period, whether it's personally or professionally. For me, it was around grief holidays that would just wipe me out totally. It's like, all right, so all hands are on deck here twice a week. One, to just like verbally vomit all the things that are happening, and two, to actually be able to do some work, right? And to get myself to a different place. But I needed that safe space. And so, I haven't needed that in a little while, but I give myself permission if it's one of those, seasons or months, and I'm like, all right, this is a level of support that I desire and that I need today, right? And that ebbs and flows depending on what's happening in our life, what our capacity looks like to kind of do that work. And so that's not the beautiful thing about it is that it's tailored to each individual. And it's not something that you have to keep doing, right? We can meet our goals. And the goal of therapy really is to transfer that knowledge and skills so that you remain the expert in your life, and not that you become dependent, right, on therapy or a therapist. But we're here, right? If you desire to have, right, that level of support.
Like that you remain the expert of your life. Again, talking to Dr. Ajetta Robinson. You can find her across all the platforms. I'm Ramon Ray, publisher of zoneofgenius.com. Can you also help us understand, Dr. Ajetta, the difference between working with a mental health professional, especially as entrepreneurs, and personal development, a life coach, things like that? I'm sure licensing and the professionalism is different, but at a high level, notwithstanding that, which is still important though, are these differences or slightly related in some way? How do you see that? I have a life
Yeah.
coach. I have a good friend, a mature friend who's built businesses and they're listening to me, giving me ideas versus a mental health professional like yourself that can deal with all the
Yes.
yucky stuff if we need to go there, right? Help me understand these
Yeah.
differences for the entrepreneurs listening. They're like, I got my girlfriend. We talk, we go to tea every week. Why do I need Dr. Ajetta and her millions of peers? Talk about that.
Yes. Yeah. I want to say that mental health professionals do not have the lock on wellness. Our ancestors, right, are proof of that. My grandmother is the wisest practitioner I know, and she has a third grade education. So we know that healing is not locked in mental health or licensed clinicians. However, there is a lot of harm that has been done by folks that are operating outside of their scope of practice. The all therapists can do coaching, but not all coaches like coaches can't do therapy, right? And so I think that's important to understand that from a skill perspective, there is a hierarchy, right? And so at the core of coaching is often solution and problem focused. That is actually a modality in therapy. It's called solution focused therapy. So most of us are trained to do that problem solving aspect. Here's where it gets tricky when you should be thinking about, oh, do I need a coach? If you want accountability, a coach can be great for that. If you have a level of insight and overall you just want support, a coach can be excellent for that. If you want someone to help you brainstorm ideas, a coach can be excellent for that. If we're not sure, or if there's some complexity, some trauma, some anxiety, some things that are clinical, or maybe even systemic and environmental, you want the benefit of not only someone that has the skill set and the insight and the training, but that also has the legal responsibility to handle you with care. We have very little recourses against coaches because they're an unregulated industry. And I function as a coach, as a business coach. I have clinicians that have transitioned to coaching. And so there's a space for both. I think it's really important for us to be intentional and careful. I see folks that are doing trauma coaching, and I have a very visceral response to that because of the harm that is caused when that coach doesn't have the insight to know when they're outside of their scope. And trauma isn't a thing that you want someone that's not a clinician handling, right? At least in this space, right? If they're a spiritual practitioner, that may be different. But most of the time, most coaches don't have the range for more complex mental health challenges. And, you wouldn't go to someone, well, maybe you would. I've been seeing a lot of folks get their dental. I usually use the example of you wouldn't go to an unlicensed dentist, right, for a root canal. And then I was on TikTok the other day and they have these dental techs. And I'm like, maybe you would, right? You probably don't want to. You run the risk of infection spread. So I really, again, just be discerning, right, around that. And it never hurts to get higher level care, right? So it doesn't hurt you if you go to you're experiencing some brain fog and you skip over your general practitioner and go right to a neurologist. That doesn't hurt you, right? They may say, hey, for maintenance, your GP can handle this, but sure, I specialize in the brain. I can take that on. And so that's kind of how I help people distinguish kind of where do you kind of desire to be, what's happening for you, right? And if you don't know, a therapist is always a good place because again, our goal is to give you step down. And so it's say, hey, I actually have a coach or someone else I can refer you to that can actually do this work with you. We're outnumbered anyway, so we'll redirect you if that's the best fit for you.
Oh, I love that. This has been good. Dr. Jen, I'm gonna ask you to help diagnose me right now to millions of people. If that's okay with you. If it's would you mind? Can I ask you a question? Is that okay?
Not happening.
Oh, not happening. Okay. So what about not diagnosed, but can I ask you a question about me then? How's that?
Yes. Yes, you can. Yes. Okay.
I know you got to be careful diagnosed. I meant a question about myself.
Yes.
Ask the question, and then you can say, Ramon, that's saved for a private session. You can say, Ramon, no, we can handle that right now. Give me some guidance here.
That's right. Absolutely.
As I think I understand it, the trauma that I think we all may know when things like this definitely mental health professional. You had issues with your mama, your daddy, money, or whatever things you're going through, abuses, all that mental health, right? That's for sure mental health.
Yes.
Let's say my case. I have issues, I think, with focus. I get down on myself for doing all the things. Is this something you'd say, what I'm hearing, I think the answer is yes, but let's see what you think, is that, yeah, Ramon, once a month, once every 2 weeks, whatever it is, mental health professional. It could be a number of others, but as I'm hearing you, I'm thinking, yeah, mental health professional, maybe over 6 months could help me unpack and unlock and do whatever they do. Is that's what I wanted to ask you. Is that make sense what I'm hearing you say, that definitely could be the work of somebody like yourself, maybe even have a little business savvy in them, but they're a mental health professional. Well, please help me unpack. That's what I wanted to ask.
Absolutely. Because it doesn't have to be that the thing that's impacting your focus is anxiety. Like you don't have to have a formal diagnosis, but it could be, right? It could be anxiety. It could be stress, right? It could be that there's something biological that's happening that's affecting your cognitive processing or clarity. It could be that we don't sleep as entrepreneurs, right? It could be a variety of things. So one of the added things that a mental health professional would do and could do is to assess what's actually impacting your ability to focus so that we develop a plan to bring the, to minimize whatever the challenges that you're experiencing are, right? If I were doing that solely from a coaching perspective, I wouldn't be able to assess that, hey, Ramon, I think maybe there's some, attention deficit kind of challenges here or some executive functioning things here, because that would be outside of my scope as a coach, but within my realm as a clinician, right? And it may be that you just need accountability, right? That we need to better structure your day and your time. And so as a coach, I may help you with just time management skills, right? And accountability. As a clinician, we can look at what might be causing some of those things and develop a treatment plan to help minimize, mitigate, or eradicate those things, and help you with skill building, to better assess when those things are kind of happening and how you want to respond to them. Because we know that your response in one situation may not work effectively in another situation because context matters. And that is the added advantage that I have as a clinician, is being able to look at that in a different perspective. I may want you to go and see your general practitioner because we know that psychological and biological things often manifest in a mental health perspective, but it may be your thyroid. And I am looking at those things as a mental health professional, because if I help you with behavior, but it is biological, we're only going to make so much progress if we don't actually address the root cause. And so those are things that I would be thinking about. It could be environment. And so how can we advocate for you at work or at home? It could be looking at like, hey, Ramon, I noticed that in your workplace, there's some things that may be impacting your ability to, have good attention. It could be lighting, it could be space, it could be a variety of things. Those are things that I would help you create as a therapist that takes a more holistic approach.
I love it. Let me repeat one more thing that I heard you say, is that you would give me a certificate to shop on Amazon for $7,000 that I could give to my wife. And I could say, Dr. Ajeta said we need to spend $7,000 to have a better office, something like that, like a permission.
The things it's usually a vacation that people say, Dr. Robinson said, and I was like, that is not what I said at all. That is what you heard. And those are not the same.
I love that, but I may still do it. Hey, Ronnie, I'm talking to my therapist, and she said you just spend $10,000, not $12,000.
Yeah. I might approve that walking desk, or that's, the walking desk pad or the standing desk or some of things like that. Like, yeah, we can get FSA to approve that for you.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Ajeta Robinson, again, thanks for being here today. Anything I didn't ask you, anything you wanted to dive into, anything I didn't touch on, and definitely I hope to have you come back. But anything in this session, you're like, Ramon, I wanted to leave this and say this as well. Anything we didn't unpack, of course, so many things, but in this season, anything else you wanted to add, Dr. Ajeta Robinson?
Yeah, we talked very briefly about how mental health or entrepreneurs experience mental health challenges at higher rates than the general population. And a big part of that is the fluctuation in revenue, the additional stress and added responsibility, and just the uncertainty that entrepreneurship can bring, but also the isolation that can be a part of the entrepreneurial journey. And so I want to just state that mental health and coming to therapy is absolutely an option, but so is safe communities. And so that can look like, the business community that, that we're a part of, right? What does community look like? It could look like going to a co-working space. I can't tell you how many of us are struggling still, that got amplified during COVID with isolation, just whether it's physical isolation or, I'm a first generation, disruptor. I'm so far out from family of origin that there's conversations that aren't relatable, that are part of my day to day. And so I need a group of folks that understand what I'm navigating in a way that's like, yeah, I'm having some successes, but I'm still having some things that are not wins. And I need to be able to talk about that without looking like I'm bragging. So there's something about having psychological safety and emotional safety and the relationships that allow you to stand in your zone of genius without feeling like you're competing or bragging or having to minimize. And so I can't emphasize enough the importance of seeking safety and community, whatever that looks like. And so I think that's an important part of being an entrepreneur and guarding our mental health and wellness.
And Dr. Ajeta, I think that is so powerful. You and I are in a complementary community together. So you get brownie points for that. And you just said the word zone of genius. You get brownie points for that too. So, but you're right. In the community you and I are in, you can put on there from, hey, dude, just made an extra 20 million. People are cheering like great. And then we're going to ask how you did it in a good way, right?
Yes, or, that's right.
Hey, I thought I had a $75,000 contract and lost it. We need that. And I think you're right. We love our family. I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my auntie and uncles and all this. But these are different relationships. And for many entrepreneurs, you're right. It's lonely. People don't, I have to be careful. Sometimes I forget. I have to be careful who I talk about. Oh, I paid this entrepreneur 50,000, or I got a ballroom for 3,000. Like, what? People, it just, and I get
Yes.
it. You're used to like church is free, or we asked Sister Betty from the church to pick us up, not
Yes.
hiring a vehicle. So the entrepreneur, what we're doing, the risk we take as well is
That's
different.
right.
But you're right. It's a lonely experience. And I like how you said that, being in communities that can help us. And I think I'll expand that. Communities could be podcast, book, but I know the best community, of course, is a actual community of humans, and community could be one-to-one, calling somebody like a
That's
Dr.
right.
Jetta or her team of over 100 people, to say, hey, I need some help. And can
That's right.
Dr. Jetta, one more time, can you just give us your full name, who you serve, where we find you? Feel free to, let's close us out by you speaking to the people about you
Yes.
before we come to an end.
Absolutely. Again, I'm Dr. Jetta Robinson. My website is ajettarobinson.com, and I am on all platforms. Dr. Ajetta Robinson is my handle. And I love working with organizations and entrepreneurs, C-suite primarily, to help improve the organizational workplace culture so people thrive and productivity and profitability will follow suit. That is what I love to do. And when I'm not doing that, I'm helping mental health professionals just leverage and scale their brilliance, right? We are so, so needed. All of us benefit. And so wherever I can serve, I'm happy to do so.
I love that. This is Ramon Ray, publisher of zoneofgenius.com. And this has been the Rundown with Ramon. Check us out at zoneofgenius.com and across the platforms, Rundown with Ramon, and whatever else you want to put in there. Dr. Jetta Robinson, thank you so much for being with us today, talking with us about all things mental health for entrepreneurs and anybody else for that matter too. Thanks.